The range echoed with sharp cracks as rounds sliced through the dry air like whips. Dust burst from targets, and instructors shouted corrections through steel megaphones. Yet near the far end of the firing line, one figure remained still, unmoving, unfazed, without lifting a weapon. He sat alone atop an ammo crate, arms folded, eyes shaded beneath the brim of a sun-bleached Navy cap, just watching. Some recruits joked he was someone's grandfather who'd wandered too close. Others guessed he was a retired range officer, too seasoned to carry a clipboard anymore. He said nothing, not even a nod. But when recruit Carter stepped into his lane, he caught something others missed, a glint of ink beneath the rolled sleeve of the old man's flannel shirt. A tattoo, a trident, aged and unmistakable. The round in Carter's chamber never fired. At that moment he knew. The man hadn't come to observe. He'd come to remember. Welcome to Hidden Sparks. Before we dive deeper, share in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this deserve a voice, subscribe to Hidden Sparks, where we bring forward untold moments that define true honor and quiet strength. The SEAL firing range was never about comfort. Gravel dug into boots, sun scorched through tactical gear, and gunfire echoed like thunder off steel backstops. Recruits stood in formation, rifles slung, shoulders squared, channeling precision, aggression, discipline. Every inch of terrain demanded it. Carter had been uneasy all week, not due to the heat or drills, but because this was the stage where instructors stopped offering gentle corrections. Every flaw here was evaluated by decibel and reaction time. 2 recruits had already been dropped, one for hesitation, the other for flinching. Now they were watching him, every movement, every breath. His mind was focused on the range, on the weapon, on his breathing and trigger squeeze. But then at the edge of the gravel pad, just beyond the designated boundary, he saw him, a lone man seated on an old ammo crate. No badge, no patch, no visible rank. Just a worn flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, faded jeans with pale knees and cracked brown boots. His face was carved in lines, eyes obscured by a sweat-stained navy ball cap, one of those caps worn by men who didn't want to speak about war but never stopped living with it. Instructors never acknowledged him. They didn't glance his way. But he watched, every recruit stepping into firing position. Carter had seen observers before, high-ranking officials with notebooks and mirrored sunglasses, but this felt different. He wasn't gathering data. He was remembering, and that shook Carter more than any instructor's bark ever could. Carter adjusted his stance, boots pressing into the gravel of the SEAL range. Rifle slung low, ears still ringing from the last volley, sun glaring off metal. Structures. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, gunpowder, and dust. But it wasn't the heat that unsettled him. It was the man, the old man. Still motionless on that crate, elbows resting on his knees, a silver thermos dangling loosely in one hand. His cap shadowed most of his face, but the weight of his gaze was unmistakable. Carter had seen observers before, evaluators with authority, looking for mistakes. But this man wasn't analyzing. He was remembering, and that alone made Carter feel more exposed than any formal inspection ever had. He tried to shake it, chambered around, steadied his footing, fired, clean hit. The steel plate rang, again and again. But between each burst, his eyes drifted back. The man still hadn't moved. On break, Carter walked over to refill his magazines near the ammo crates. Around him, low voices traded quips and curses, the usual banter to mask the strain. But even they had noticed him. "Who's that guy by the fence?" someone whispered. "Probably someone's granddad. He hasn't blinked since we got here," came the reply. Carter said nothing. He had seen what they hadn't just moments earlier, when the man had slowly stood to stretch, a casual, natural motion. But in adjusting his sleeve, the cuff slipped back just enough to reveal something beneath a tattoo. Faded, sun-worn, partially blurred by age, but unmistakable. Carter recognized it immediately. The SEAL trident, not the modern, flashy designs. seen online or at the PX. This was different. Sharper lines, purposeful, weathered not by neglect but by life, by combat. The eagle, the trident, the anchor, the flintlock, a legacy etched into skin. Carter's pulse jumped. That symbol wasn't awarded for completing Bud-ass. It was earned in places never shown on camera, never posted online. He knew the stories, the early teams, the denied missions, the legends who vanished into the jungle, sea, or mountain, leaving only silence behind. And now, one of them stood 20 feet away, holding a thermos, watching him. Back at the line, Carter stepped up again, tried to refocus, front sight, breathing. But his hands felt different, not shaking, just aware that someone was watching who didn't care about stats or checklists, someone who had done it, truly done it in silence. It humbled him. He didn't tell anyone, didn't point him out. Somehow he knew this wasn't a story to share. It was something to carry, and it was watching him, every breath, every shot. Show me who you are. That's what it felt like, not said, not shouted, just known. It wasn't in the manual, it wasn't part of the schedule. And recruits weren't supposed to break formation. But Carter did. The instructors had just called rotation, time to hydrate, and reset. Recruits moved in clusters, laughing, groaning, but Carter turned, feet moving of their own will, toward the man. He walked slowly, uncertain why. Each step crossed an invisible line, not forbidden, just sacred. A boundary enforced not by rule, but by reverence. The man didn't move, still seated, hands on knees, thermos resting in one palm. But as Carter neared, he looked up, just slightly. Their eyes met, and in that moment time slowed, not out of fear, but because of the weight behind that look. A calm, solid presence, someone who had carried something heavy for a long time, a gaze that said, "I've seen louder men die quieter." Deaths. Carter stopped a few feet away. No salute, no words, just stood there. Then, instinctively, he glanced again at the man's arm, the tattoo. This time the man didn't adjust his sleeve. He simply turned his arm outward, casually resting it on his knee, as if it was always meant to be seen. Carter crouched, not to kneel, not to revere, but to understand. The ink was older than he imagined, lines softened by time, yet the image was clear. Eagle, anchor, flintlock, trident. Weathered, proud. Not a tattoo, but a story carved into flesh. There were scars around it. Faint, but there. Carter didn't need to ask their origin. He didn't touch it. Just looked, with reverence. Not at art, but at proof. Then he looked up. The man hadn't spoken, but something in his gaze softened ever so slightly, as if to say, "You see it now." Carter nodded, not to earn approval, but to honor what he now knew. Then the man did something unexpected. He lifted the thermos and held it out, not as an offering, but as a gesture, a passing. Carter took it gently. Didn't open it, just hold it. The man stood. Bones creaked, but his posture was upright. They faced each other, a boy becoming a warrior who no longer needed the title. And then the old man turned, walked down the gravel path behind the firing sheds, disappeared into the glare of the sun. No name, no salute, no speech. Just silence, but the presence remained. Long after the shadow had vanished, Carter stood still, thermos in hand, eyes fixed on the dust settling behind him. The other recruits regrouped. Instructors barked orders, but everything felt quieter now. Eventually, Carter returned to the line, moved slower, said nothing. There was nothing to explain. He placed the thermos beside his rifle. It was warm. The touch. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The gesture had meant something beyond coffee, beyond thirst. It was about trust, about transmission. Something unspoken passed from one generation to the next, one sip at a time, that round. Of firing, Carter was changed. Not louder, not faster, just steadier. Every shot is precise. Every breath matched its recoil. He no longer checked to see who was watching. He already knew. One instructor, a chief rarely known for more than a grunt, stood beside Carter after his volley, said nothing for several seconds. Then, quietly, "You talk to him?" Carter gave a single nod. The chief didn't ask what was said, just smiled, a rare, quiet smile. Then I walked away. That night, while others played cards or messaged home, Carter sat at the edge of the barracks, pulled out an old notebook, wrote one sentence. Some men leave behind medals, others leave behind silence. The rarest leave both and need neither to be remembered. The next Thursday, Carter looked for him, arrived early, scanned the crates, the benches by the fence, nothing. The instructors carried on. The drills resumed, but the crate stayed empty. A week passed. Then another. Carter never saw him again. But in the moments between shots, during lulls in the drill, he could still feel it. That gaze. Not critical, not proud, just watching. Some legends don't need a name. They don't wear medals. They don't speak in grand speeches. They just appear quietly and let their silence say everything. That old man at the SEAL range hadn't come to train anyone. He came to remember, and in doing so, he became the standard. There's a kind of presence that doesn't seek attention. It earns it silently, permanently, and sometimes all it takes is a faded tattoo to remind you you're standing in the footsteps of giants. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone whose silence weighed more than 1,000 words? Share their name in the comments. Let their legacy be seen. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks to help us share the stories of the quiet heroes who shaped us. And remember, if you ever feel eyes on you during training, don't panic. It might just be someone checking if you're worthy of the path you're walking. Thank you for watching.